Sure, let's dig into the comparison between Baochai and Daiyu some more. So in the 37th chapter, we have this cool event called the Haitang Poetry Society, which takes place at the Fall Studio in the Hengwu Garden. Super interesting, right? It starts off with Jia Zheng leaving on a business trip, finally giving Baoyu the freedom he craves. No more restrictions holding him back, so he's just wasting his time away. Now, one day, when he's feeling bored, Tanchun's maid named Tsuema hands him a fancy letter on some fancy paper. Turns out, it's a letter from Tanchun herself. And she has this intriguing idea in there. She suggests that they should take a page out of the ancient literates book and form a little group of like-minded folks. They can hang out in the beautiful scenery, set up a poetry platform, or even establish their own poetry society. It might just be a passing fancy, but who knows, it could be a topic talked about for ages. Baoyu is ecstatic after reading the letter. He's all about this kind of stuff, right? And guess what? Turns out, his little sister is the one with all the culture and sophistication. So now, he's all pumped up to discuss it further. Where does he go? To the Fall Studio, of course. Away he goes in a hurry. In the Daguan Garden, Tanchun lived in the Fall Studio. Let's skip a few paragraphs and focus on this part. Baoyu shows up, and there are already Baochai, Daiyu, Yingchun, and Shichuan. They all greet him with a smile, saying, "Oh, here comes another one." Tanchun laughs and says, "I'm a romantic person. I had a random thought and wrote a few lines, and before I knew it, everyone joined in." They all share the same interest, and Baoyu says, "It's a shame we didn't start a poetry society sooner." Daiyu jokes, "You guys can go ahead and start the society, but count me out. I'm not brave enough." She's just kidding, of course, and then they start discussing their plans. Liwan also joins them and is all for starting a poetry society. She volunteers to take charge. What does that mean? It means she wants to be the president of the society, taking the lead. She admits that she can't write poetry herself, but she's good at evaluating it. Basically, she's like a literary critic. We'll see later on that she's not great at composing poems but excels at judging them. So, she volunteers to be the president. With a president in place, they also need 2 vice presidents. Of course, the president gets to choose them, right? They pick Yingchun and Shichuan. Neither of them really enjoys writing poetry, so they take on different roles. Yingchun, as one of the vice presidents, is responsible for coming up with themes and setting rhyming rules, while Shichuan takes charge of what? Oversight. During the competition, someone needs to supervise, stand by, observe, and keep track of the popularity of the poems. So, now that they had formed the Poetry Society, Daiyu had an idea. She suggested that they should come up with pen names instead of using their regular titles like sister or brother-in-law. It would make things more interesting and unconventional. And so, everyone started picking their unique pen names. Liwan was the first to choose and she decided on Old Farmer of Fragrant Rice. It makes sense because she lives in Fragrant Rice Village. Tanchun, on the other hand, went with Fall Scholar. But Baoyu wasn't too convinced. He thought that scholar didn't quite capture Tanchun's essence and it sounded a bit burdensome. After all, we have plenty of phoenix trees and banana plants around here. But Tanchun wasn't swayed. She loved banana plants the most, so she settled on guest beneath the banana trees. Daiyu's pen name was actually chosen by Tanchun. Tanchun pointed out that Daiyu currently resides in the Shaoxiang Pavilion and she often cries, right? In the future, she will cry for her departed husband. And those bamboo trees will turn into speckled bamboo, just like in a historical story. Shaoxiang bamboo have spots, just like tears shed by the two concubines of an emperor back then. So, they decided to call Daiyu the Lady of the Xiang. Daiyu agreed to it. Now, what about Shui Baochai? Li Wan gave her the pen name Gentleman of Hengwu. So, everyone had their own unique pen names. Yingchun sister number 2 went with Lingzhou, which was her nickname. As for Shichuan, sister number 4, she lives in the Lotus Pavilion. They decided to call her the Fragrant Lotus. With their pen names chosen, they were all ready to embark on their poetic journey. Let's keep going. The big competition is about to start, so let's skip a few parts. Tanchun said, I came up with the idea, so I should be the host first to show my enthusiasm. Li Wan suggested, since that's the case, why don't you start the society tomorrow? Tanchun replied, why wait for tomorrow when we can do it today? This moment is perfect. Let's not just pick a random date, let's seize the moment. Since we're all here today, why not let Yingchun choose the topic, Lingzhou with setting the rhyme restrictions, Lingzhou refers to Yingchun, and Fragrant Lotus will be the judge. Let's see how Yingchun decides on the topic and rules. She says, in my opinion, one person shouldn't decide on the topic and rules. Let's draw lots and be fair. Yesterday we talked about how Yingchun represents Taoist philosophy, which is all about going with the flow. So it makes sense to let fate decide, right? Drawing lots is a way of going with the flow. So what should the topic be? Li Wan had an idea. When I came in earlier, I saw 2 pots of white begonias being brought in. They're such beautiful flowers, why don't we write poems about them? Yingchun responded, we haven't even had a chance to admire them yet, and you already want to start writing poems? Baochai added, they're just white begonias. Why do we have to wait until we see them to start writing? Ancient poets often wrote poems based on imagination and emotions. If they had to wait to see things before writing, there wouldn't be as many poems. Ah, that makes sense. When poets write about something, like nature or objects, it's called poetry of things, right? They don't actually have to see the thing right there and then. It's all about the experiences they've had in life. So poets collect their related feelings and impressions, and they don't necessarily have to see things in real time. Baochai's point is logical. Alright, now it's my turn to set the rhyme rules. Yingchun exclaimed. How should we do it? She walked over to the bookshelf and randomly grabbed a book of poetry. Flipping through its pages, she discovered a poem written in a 7-character verse. That's it, she declared, we will all write in a 7-character verse. After showing the poem to everyone, they all agreed to follow this form. With the form decided, Yingchun put the book away and turned to one of the maids. Just say any word, she instructed. The maid, who happened to be leaning against the door, blurted out the word men. Yingchun grinned and declared, that will be our rhyme, men, door, dot. Now, the rhyme men belongs to the rhyme group called Shisan Yuan. In ancient poetry, words were categorized based on their pronunciation to create rhymes. Men falls into the rhyme group known as Shisan Yuan. Then, the rhyme for the character of men is Shisan Yuan. In ancient times, when composing poetry, rhyme was important. They categorized the pronunciations of characters and grouped them into different rhyme classes. The character men belongs to the rhyme class Shisan Yuan. They even had a tool called a rhyme card box, which contained characters for each rhyme class. They would randomly draw a compartment from the rhyme class Shisan Yuan and instruct a maid to pick 10 characters from it. Each compartment would contain wooden blocks with a character engraved on each block. What was Yingchun's principle? Drawing lots, right? So they let the maid casually pick 4 blocks, and it wasn't her own choice. The Taoists practice subtraction, right? Similar to the Confucians who emphasize the harmony between heaven and humans, but the Confucians focus on humans, while the Taoists focus on heaven. The Taoists believe that human happiness comes from heaven, while human suffering and troubles come from humans themselves. Therefore, the Taoist starting point is to minimize human factors as much as possible. This is called subtraction. So Yingchun didn't even reach out her own hand to touch the blocks, she had another maid randomly pick 4 blocks with characters. Alright, here it is. So, there are 4 words: pen, soul, scar, and dusk. And the word before them is door, right? That makes a total of 5 words, and that sets the rules for the competition. In this type of poem called a 7-character verse, there are 8 lines, right? The last word of the first line has to be door. The last word of the second line has to be pen. And for the 4th line, it must end with soul. The 6th line has to end with scar, and the last line has to end with dusk. So, the poem should incorporate these words: door, pen, soul, scar, dusk. The rhyme restrictions are quite strict. It's like being handcuffed tightly, forcing you to dance with the handcuffs on. What is Chao Shuoqin trying to convey with this scene? It's about highlighting the importance of literature in Chinese culture and the refined upbringing of the young ladies in noble families, right? Nowadays, we wouldn't dare to have such competitions, would we? Once the handcuffs are on, there's no room for movement. They are about to start dancing, and there are even stricter regulations, with time limits as well. They bring out a special type of incense called dream sweet fragrance. It's very delicate, only about 3 inches long, and as thin as a lantern wick. Such incense burns easily, and if the poem is not completed before the incense burns out, there will be a penalty. The conditions are really demanding. The maid got 4 sets of paper and pens ready, and then everyone just started thinking quietly. The way it's described here is pretty interesting. Let's see how they go about writing their poems. Let's start with Daiyu. Some touch the phoenix tree, some admire the autumn colors, and some even make jokes with the maids. They chat and laugh, appreciate the fall scenery, and run their fingers through the leaves of the phoenix tree. This dream sweet fragrance is just 3 inches long. Who goes first? It's Tanchun. She grabs the pen and starts writing, then erases and makes changes. She needs to tweak something, showing off her poetic talent among the sisters, right? Then she passes it on to Yingchun. Next, they ask Baochai, "Hey Hengwu Jun, you got anything?" Baochai says, "Yeah, I do, but it's not good." Of course, Baochai says it in a humble way. What's Baoyu up to? He's pacing back and forth on the corridor with his hands behind his back. What's he doing? He's worried about Daiyu. Listen, they're all done. Daiyu says, "Don't mind me." Baoyu notices that Baochai finished writing too and goes, "Wow. There's only an inch of incense left." Actually, he's reminding Daiyu again. "I only have 4 lines, then he says to Daiyu, "What are you doing squatting on the grass?" Daiyu ignores him, and Baoyu decides he can't wait any longer and starts writing at the desk. Liwan says, "Let's read the poems. If you're not done by the time we're done reading, there'll be punishment." This is directed at Daiyu. Then Baoyu goes, "Even though Farmer Daoxiang isn't good at writing, she's good at judging, and she's super fair. You are the judge, and we all agree." Everybody naturally agrees. So now, who's gonna snag that first place? Liwan's given the authority for that. Let's check out Tanchun's poem first. The title is pretty straightforward. It's called Ode to the White Begonia Blossom. It's kinda like how Westerners make music, in A major, with a clarinet, like a concerto, you know? The structure is set, it has to be in A major and like a concerto, but who's gonna be the soloist? The clarinet, no doubt. So now they've all got their pieces ready. The theme is to praise the white crabapple blossom, and what are the rules again? The rhyme rules must be followed strictly. How does Tanchun's poem go then? Tanchun's poem goes like this. The slanting sun chills the grass by the door, pots filled with lush moss after the rain, jade carries a purity beyond compare, snow melts souls like flesh and bone, a fragrant heart falters with delicate strength, a graceful figure bears moonlit traces, no need for immortal gowns or feathered transformations, in my heart, I sing of the twilight. So, what's the basic rule of a chilu, a type of 7-character 8-line poetry? It's made up of 4 stanzas, with the first one being the head, followed by the chin, neck, and the last one is the tail. Now, what about the 2 stanzas in between? They have to be a pair of couplets, and they should fit together neatly. Take Du Fu's Chilu poem, Climbing Heights, for example. In the middle 2 stanzas, it goes like this: leaves keep falling, making a rustling sound, while the Yangtze River rolls endlessly, a perfect match. Traveling thousands of miles, he often feels autumn's sorrow, plagued by illness for 100 years, yet still standing alone on the stage.